Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details. Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Hello, welcome to Tsundoku, the podcast for people who pack as many books in their summer holiday luggage as they do clothes. I'm Sarah Martin.
And I'm Michaela Andreyev.
And I'm Annie Hastwell. We're all here today. Kath's here as well. And we're going to give you some of our ideas of what we've been reading this year.
We've got a program packed with summer reads, Christmas books. So I guess this kind of makes us the one-stop shop for all your Christmas ideas.
But Kath, let's kick off with the book that you have been reading, have been interviewing the author of, and sounds like a perfect holiday read, easy read.
Yes, it is, Annie. It's Alan Carter's Crocodile Tears, and I've been a fan of Alan Carter since I discovered the Cato Kwong series. There are 6 previous novels, and they're mostly set in Fremantle, which is where Alan Carter himself was living until recently, as you'll hear when we hear the chat with him. So in this book, Crocodile Tears, Detective Philip Cato Kwong is investigating the death of a retiree who he finds gruesomely hacked to pieces in his suburban Perth home. And then the trail leads to Timor-Leste with its horrible blood-soaked history, which Alan Carter seems to have immersed himself in quite fully. And Cato is reunited there with an old frenemy who is a spook called Rory Driscoll, who's always been a bit of a hazy operator as far as Cato's concerned. And of course, as is the way with these stories, Cato's own personal story comes in bits, and we're all quite invested in that, those of us who've been following his career to date. I found with dismay when I got to the end that this is the last outing for Cato Kwong. So it's a great ending, Crocodile Tears, part espionage thriller, police procedural, and it uncovers quite a few uncomfortable secrets about Australia's history and behaviour in the Timor-Leste story. So I asked Alan first, would he take us back through Cato Kwong's career?
We first meet Cato about 10 or 12 years ago in kind of real time, because I've kind of written him in a real-time sense. So he's aged with the novels. Mm. And at that point, he had been demoted to the stock squad. That's the people responsible for rooting out often petty rural crime, sometimes not so petty, for having blotted his copybook, so to speak. So he was a cop in need of redemption, and I gave it to him in prime cut. Through that time, he then proceeded to get back into the detective branch and work at Fremantle for over the next several years, I think. And by the end, he's finally accepted the offer to go and work in major crime, who he'd always tried to keep at bay previously to protect his patch. But he finally went over to the dark side.
Well, he sure meets major crime in Crocodile Tears. There are so many threads of corruption and malfeasance to follow that it's quite a ride. Can we start with the quote that you choose as an epigraph from Charlotte J. Break not the bones?
The novel itself, Crocodile Tears, emerged from a PhD I was doing in creative writing, and this was a PhD novel. And the thesis of the PhD was around the idea of Australian crime fiction over the decades being a good vehicle for reflecting Australia's relationship with its neighbours in the Asia Pacific. And, of course, as part of that, I read Beaten Up the Bones, written way back in the early 1950s by Charlotte Jay.
Yeah, I think she's an
a
Adelaide
good
writer.
Adelaide woman.
Yes, she
That's
is.
right, yeah. And that's a fantastic book, and with a strong anti-colonial message in it. Even though I think at the time she might have actually denied that that's what she was being, but certainly for me it read like that. And so coming to the idea of doing a novel around those themes, it seemed that one good expression of Australia's troubled relationship with its near neighbours was to do with the relationship with Timor-Leste, which you go back to the Second World War, and it was, the kind of the big brother type thing, and, fighting the good fight to liberate that area from the Japanese. But then over the subsequent years, you had the issues to do with the Indonesian invasion, the claims for oil, and then the bugging of the oil negotiations. So a very complex relationship and an interesting one to explore in crime fiction.
Absolutely. And I think the Charlotte J quote is something like, some find satisfactory ways of shrugging off discarded selves and others run amok.
I think she was referring to kind of expatriates abroad finding themselves in kind of tropical places where I think that, some of them kind of turn to the dark side because they feel liberated from whatever they were dealing with at home. Yeah, just kind of reinventing themselves, if you like. And so there's a lot of those themes are played out in Crocodile Tears.
They are. And I found myself thinking Graham Greene, John le Carré, Mick Herron as a more recent writer of kind of modern spy thrillers. But this is Asia Pacific, and it's such an important story and such a close at hand story for us. It's still going on, and you went, and I imagine that you probably got yourself in some sticky situations.
Yes, I mean, as part of the research, I went to Timor-Leste and did I was shown around by somebody from the Australian military in the embassy there who showed me to a lot of places, and then also got introduced to the AFP people there, and then through them to the Timor National Police. That included a visit to the National Police headquarters in Dili, which was basically a kind of a big dusty compound surrounded by buildings. But in the middle of this compound, there was a fenced-off area, quite a lush pond with a big fence around it. And upon closer inspection, I actually found that there was a 6-meter saltwater crocodile in there.
I thought you made that up.
No, it was really there. You don't make this stuff up. And I was assured it was a kind of a totem because of the national association with the crocodile in Timor. But certainly it would focus the minds of anybody who's just been arrested, for sure.
There is so much going on in this novel, Alan. I think by about page 2 we're in the Philippines, and Rory Driscoll, who we figure out has sort of been pulled out of mothballs to resume his spook activities, is confronting some nasty heavy in some dive, and the first killing takes place, and he reports back to a certain auntie. She is great. Do we ever know who she actually is or what her position is?
She's kind of his... Rory Driscoll, who was a spook who first appeared in the third Cato novel, Bad Seed, and at that time he was based in Shanghai, trying to head off any troubles that the government got itself into there. Now he's being brought out of his self-inflicted retirement because he just got jack of the job, really, and the corrupt nature of the job in terms of his morals. And he's been asked to babysit a bunch of whistleblowers tied in with the bugging of the old negotiations, which, of course, is drawn from real-life headlines.
Yeah.
And he's basically accepted because he's on the same death list that these people are on. So it suits his purposes to look after himself as well. But his relationship with Auntie, who he's known for many years, who has been his handler. It is a kind of almost a maternal relationship.
She's something big in Canberra.
Yeah, she's based in Canberra, and in this novel, Rory plays pretty well equal billing with Cato. They share
He does.
The novel, and gradually they start off a few states apart from each other, but gradually come closer and closer, and of course end up meeting up again in Timor.
Yeah, their trajectories are great. And you, I'm sure, had a lot of fun running Rory Driscoll and his charges around southern Tasmania, where you now live.
That's right, yes. I thought I may as well make use of what they say, write what you know. So what I knew to know is southern Tasmania. So I have been wandering around Hobart and Bruny Island and places like that, and making some observations about the local underbelly, if you like.
Yeah, do you know, I read this book at my little home away from home on Bruny Island.
Ah, right.
And realised that I was probably, while dipping my toe into the channel, you were probably doing the same over the other side.
Absolutely, yeah. And taking them to a caravan park on Bruny called the Captain Cook Adventure Park or something. And again, all of that little threads tie into this kind of post-colonial aspect, which also tied back into the PhD.
Yeah. And the PhD, if we can depart to that for a minute, I imagine, I've done one of these, you've got I don't know how it works where you were, but you have to write your full-length novel or whatever it is, and then, in my case, long exegesis about whatever theory was behind it. You presented some academic papers along with your book.
That's right, yeah.
And were they about Australia's activities, how we didn't cover ourselves with glory in the Timor-Leste story?
The exegesis is more tied around the literary and cultural, the history of Australian crime fiction and its ability to reflect certain aspects of society or society's history. So it's more like a kind of a cultural literary theory thing, which, to be honest, completely did my head in because academic language it doesn't come naturally to me as a crime fiction novelist. I'm usually trying to kind of entertain and interest people, whereas the academic language immediately puts up a solid brick wall between you and the reader.
Yeah.
So it was quite a balancing act to work through that as well.
Yeah, but you scaled the wall and you're now Dr. Allen.
That's right. A doctor to everybody from now on. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've teased out some of those threads, and I haven't even mentioned what Cato starts out investigating, which is the horrific murder of two pensioners who, however, turn out to also have connections to the old Timor-Leste story.
Yes, when we first meet Cato, he is investigating, murders in suburban Fremantle of what seem to be two very unrelated situations. An old man beaten to death, but the threads gradually come together with this link back to Timor, which takes him there. But meanwhile, he's also carrying a whole bunch of demons from the previous four books, if you like, which I've inflicted upon him. And so he needs to be kind of dealing with that as well as holding together his family life as well.
That's right. You drop in little installments of what's going on between Philip and Sharon. And actually that bears heavily on how the book winds up, which I loved, but I won't give away.
Yes. No spoilers, please.
No spoilers. No, don't worry. So you get them all across the Timor Sea and, wow, all hell breaks loose.
The tie-in is not only to the oil negotiations, but there's history going back to the independence referendum and the violence unleashed by the Indonesian military and the pro-Indonesian militia. And then there's even history going back before that as well. So there's all sorts of things come into play which act upon the plot.
They do. It was very exciting and actually really chilling there really aren't many good guys. Certainly in authority, there don't seem to be many good guys who haven't sold out in one way or another. And a lot of the old guard from the bad old days in Timor-Leste itself, the warlords, if you like, they're still rampaging around doing evil.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the way of the world, that in terms of kind of horrific periods in different countries' histories, it's remarkable how many of the people who were behind all that continue to exert their influence and authority over things and seem to be kind of redeemed and back in the fold. And that's probably gone on for decades and centuries, I suppose, all around the world.
Yeah, it was quite upsetting, really, because that's so near at home. And, Australia border control has no better and a lot worse than in some other places.
That's right, yeah.
So do you think, if we set the novel aside for a while and just think about those other issues you raised, I mean, I have always thought that crime fiction can do a lot to spell out the future in sociological terms. You know, people like Gary Disher in Australia have just been fantastic in that way. Yeah. And you too. I mean, why not look to crime fiction for some sorts of models of how things could be in our region?
All of the crime fiction that I like to read usually is kind of holding up a mirror to that particular society that I'm reading about. And Gary Disher is doing an amazing job of that at the moment. That's for many, many years now, among others. It has that drive of solving mysteries, righting wrongs. I mean, I come from a background before writing of being a documentary maker involved in kind of, talking about society. And I've actually felt I could raise a whole lot more issues about society in writing fiction than I possibly ever could get away with in terms of making factual documentaries.
I agree entirely. I think, that's the story of my absolute favourite crime writer, Denise Miner, who, is a Glaswegian, and she started out as an academic writing a thesis on the medicalisation of women's madness, and she thought, well, this is good, but 5 people will read it.
Right.
And from there, she's gone on to be, a beacon of exposing what's actually going on in the world at grassroots level. The good crime fiction writers can do that like no one else can. You have won the Ned Kelly Award and the Ngaio Marsh Award, which means you've also been casting your eye over New Zealand.
That's right. And name dropping and spookily enough, Denise Miner, who you just mentioned, she's the one who actually handed the award over to me.
Oh, Alan. Oh, how fabulous.
Yeah,
congratulations.
It was lovely to meet her in person and just talk about a whole bunch of stuff that I think we all share in terms of values. It's quite fortuitous. I just happened to be living in New Zealand during that time, which made me eligible to enter and win. And then almost immediately after that, we had to leave because we had an accident on the farm which needed to be back in Australia in terms of medical care and everything. So it was like a Viking raid on the Ngaio Marsh Award. I went over there, snatched it and left.
Way to go. I really loved Barbara Man and Doom Creek as well. Well, if you're dropping Philip Kwong, what next?
Well, I've just completed a Tasmania-based novel, completely whole new set of characters, and we'll see what happens with that. But I'm also I'm going to be heading back to New Zealand in the new year to do some research for a third Nick Chester novel.
Oh, excellent. Oh, I can't wait to read both of those. Am I right in thinking that Fremantle publishes Western Australian authors, and you were one but now you're not? Is that how it still works?
I think their priority and focus is either Western Australian authors or the stories, but some of their authors, like myself, are, like Dave Warner, for instance, is based in Sydney, I think. Mm-hmm. So the people in their stable kind of live all over the place, nationally and internationally. So I think it's part of, if you're in the stable, and they like what you're writing, they'll keep on publishing it. Yeah, but I think when they're taking on new writers, I think the local writer, local stories thing is more important at that point.
All right, well, we should just finish warning people that Crocodile Tears has its gruesome moments, and don't lose sight of that crocodile.
Absolutely, yeah. The Crocodile Tears, it covers a kind of a very bloody stage in Indonesia's recent history.
Yeah.
But I think the themes that are addressed in there are pretty important in terms of how Australia sees itself. But also, I'd like to think it's a rollicking good read as well. So it sounds heavy, but it's also very compelling, I think.
A ripping yarn, capital letters. It really is.
That's the one.
Alan, lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kath.
Crocodile Tears by Alan Carter, with whom I hope to connect at some future date, maybe in Tasmania. And I recommend you all to pick it up. It's a Fremantle Press book.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details. Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details. Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
The very reason we're all recording Tsundoku today together is because it's the end of the year, and we couldn't resist that trope of podcasts and radio where you look back over 2022 and discuss what you've read. And we figured that way we might share a couple of recommendations with one another. Who wants to go first?
All right, I'll go first. I think I made it pretty obvious throughout the year that I love Meshi, A Personal History of Japanese Food by Katherine, Tamiko, Arguille. A fantastic book. I recommend that for anyone with an interest in food or in Japanese culture. It's just brilliant. Another one I absolutely loved listening to or hearing about was Holy Woman, A Divine Adventure by Louise Omer. That was one that Kath did just a few weeks ago, and that is going to be on my Christmas buying list. I can't wait to spend a bit of time over summer reading that. I guess the book that I would recommend to you all for the year is one that was recommended to me. It was recommended by my eldest daughter, who's 23. It's called Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention by Johan. And it's just a really fabulous book, and I think it would suit people of all ages. We've all been affected by, the sort of the disruptive nature of social media in the last few years. And so Johan gives us 12 reasons why we're all so distracted. And I don't know if you are all like me, but it's really hard to concentrate these days.
Sure, I get this all the time. You flit, a ding goes off on your phone and suddenly you're not present anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And he gives a whole lot of reasons why that's the case. One that really resonated with me, he makes an analogy between being distracted by media with overeating. And he sort of said, his guest, or the person he interviews, says, you can blame McDonald's for being overweight, and sure, like big tech, they've got a lot of energy behind making sure that people do eat too much. But you also have to look at the triggers in yourself. And I thought about how I'm easily distracted, and I know it's when I need to sit down and do a big task. And Annie, you actually gave me the term for that. Whenever I'm ready to sit down to do a big task, I start doing
oh, I think I'll make a cake, or
Yeah.
I think I'll hang the washing out, or
Exactly. I think you gave me the term displacement activities.
which I have to credit to my daughter because she does that to me. If I ring her up with some random request, she goes, displacement activity.
Exactly. And so I realise that's what I'm doing. I edit big pieces of audio with my day job, and I know when I'm about to sit down and edit something, I'm going to have to give it 2, 3, 4 hours. And so I start distracting myself. So I will, first of all, make a cup of tea, then I'll check my emails, and then I might, if I turn on Instagram, then I've easily lost half an hour looking at reels. So it's really brought to my attention that I've got to look at those triggers, is that when I need to concentrate, I probably just need to sit down and concentrate, because once I start editing, I love it. I don't want to stop, but something about starting I find a bit hard. So anyway, that's my story. That's why I love Stolen Focus by Johan Hari, and I recommend it to everybody this Christmas. Have a read.
I think that's really good because it's during holidays that we really love all that sort of philosophy, self-help stuff,
Yeah.
because you think you're going to change your life every January.
Exactly.
Everything's going to be different this year.
Yeah.
So one of the books, this has been around for a few years, that I would recommend to anyone who wants to lie about at Christmas and enjoy reading, is called How to Be Idle. It's a Loafer's Manifesto by a British man who looks pretty idle, called Tom Hodgkinson.
I think you do need to read this, Annie. I've never seen you idle. In fact, you're meant to be watching a cake right now, aren't you?
I am actually, yes. I need to run out in a minute and get that. So at the beginning I thought, this is getting a little bit tedious, because it was just all about how the capitalist world has got us all working too hard. And I was thinking, well, we do need to work. But as he goes into all the different things that we're not enjoying, and he actually goes, this is a little bit ideologically unsound. He even goes into the history of smoking and why people smoke, and partying, and it allows, we live in a very correct world these days. It allows us to think about, well, hang on, what about me? And a really quite affecting bit, remember they wouldn't let prisoners smoke? And he does this lovely explanation of why people who are poor and down and out in the margins of society need to do that, because it's the one thing that they can own for themselves.
Yes.
So it's really about self-determination versus a system, and it's very amusingly written, and it delves back in time, all sorts of, from Byron to all sorts of philosophers, and then forward in time. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's going to change my life, that's for sure.
Now, I have also been reading Stolen Focus, Michaela,
what did you
and
think?
I love it. I love it in so many ways. And in a minute, I'll read a bit of it, but I don't have that right in front of me. So I'll read that in a little while. Maybe we can sign off with that. So what I did thinking about what I'd recommend today was I had a look back over my year, and I specifically thought, well, I will not choose the books that I have talked about on the podcast, because I thought, well, everybody's heard me ramble on about those. So, I love them all, but I'm going to recommend things that are out of a different box. One that I'm reading with my son right now, which I am absolutely loving, is called Runt, and it's by Craig Silvey. Now, Craig Silvey, as many will know, he's behind Jasper Jones and Honeybee. Devastating portrayals of young adolescents living some very tough lives and tough situations. And so when I saw that he had essentially wrote not a picture book, a book with pictures for younger children, I was like, oh, how's he going to do? But it is beautiful. It is written about the town of ups and downs, and it's set around this young girl, Annie Shearer, and her dog Runt. And there's the sort of evil wealthy man that lives on the hill that's stolen all the town's water, and it's just smacks of all of the beauty of books like Matilda. It's like a Roald Dahl. It's written with just as much humour and the pace and the imagination, and it's got these gorgeous pictures in it as well. And it's just, I can't rave on it more about, if you're looking for a book for your children
That you're going to enjoy as well.
that you will love reading, and it will have a place on your bookshelf. It's one of those that I can see, that'll be a classic children's book that people will be talking about in years to come. It's just divine. So
Great recommendation.
100% recommend that if you've got kids, and even if you just want to read it yourself. The other book, which is a fiction that I loved, is called The Unusual Abduction of Avery Conifer. It's by a lady called Isla Evans, and it's about two grandmothers who steal their granddaughter. basically one of the grandmothers notices that she's got bruises on her arms, and it's her son's daughter. And so she basically rocks up at the other grandmother's house with child in tow. The grandmothers don't get along, not even in the slightest. They detest one another. And yet they both agree to run away together and hide from the authorities, essentially go on this Thelma and Louise story with their granddaughter.
Those two characters, yeah.
And it's beautiful. Like, it's funny, and it's got a gorgeous energy, and it resolves nicely. You know, it sounds like it could get sinister, but it remains humorous, touches on serious issues, but actually takes you on a really cool ride. So 100% recommend that one. Yeah. It's really fun. It's a really fun book. And of course, Stolen Focus, which you mentioned before, Michaela, which I 100% recommend. So Annie, you've probably got more than one recommendation, don't you?
I guess one that I can never go past is Jennifer Egan. I would just sit waiting for her to finish her next book, really. She won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago for A Visit from the Goon Squad, which is just, if you haven't read it, please read it. And she put out one this year called The Candy House, and it's just wonderful. She seems to be able to sum up everything that's happened in the last 30 or 40 years in this wonderfully robust, right now way. It's like a jigsaw of our lives. And it's just a brilliant book. Please read it. And the other one I did enjoy, and I met the author while I was at the Writers' Festival earlier this year, was a book called Sweetness and Light by Liam Pepper. And it's another book that's set in India, hippie India, and quite a thriller, really good. A very unscrupulous hero. You would not call him a hero, main character, protagonist. That's a really thoroughly good holiday read if you want something that comes to an interesting conclusion. And Kath, what about you? I know you read all the time. What stands out for you this year?
So front of mind for me are two novels each by two authors who are completely new to me. One is Shankari Chandran, and she's a text author. She has published two books in the 1 year, Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens and Song of the Sun God. And they're both about the experience of Tamil Sri Lankans in Australia in the first one, Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens, which presents itself as very cosy, sort of a story about a retirement home that's been set up by two now Australian, one-time Sri Lankan Tamil, very cluey people, for older people from their country and Australians and people of other backgrounds. It's very funny, but it also takes you back into quite a bloody history and teaches you an awful lot that you didn't know, probably, about the Tamil-Sinhalese conflicts. And Song of the Sun God, which I suspect might have been written first, has come out second. That takes us right back to the 30s in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and is a gripping and quite a difficult read, because it's a horrible story, it's a horrible history, but it follows you through one family's journey. I recommend that very highly. I've just finished that one, Song of the Sun God, and Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. And another writer that I discovered who's a Fremantle Press star is Karen Herbert. The second one of hers I read, it's the same story. I think she wrote this one first, but it came out second, The Castaways of Harewood Hall. People will think that she is riding on the coattails of Richard Osman, the Richard Osman series, which I recommend thoroughly if people haven't read them, because they are so entertaining. The Thursday Murder Club, there's 3 of them now, and in this quite remarkable retirement village in the Richard Osman books, remarkable retirees with quite interesting histories. Same story in The Castaways of Harewood Hall. I suspect she might have written hers before Richard wrote his, and she'll always be thought of as someone copying him, but it's a delightful story. So Josh is a sweet, well-meaning university student with a big heart. He is a carer, a part-time carer at Harewood Hall, retirement village, again for people with a bit of money. But he steals 2 research mice from a campus laboratory and hides them in the basement of the retirement village, and things escalate from there. There's a cat called Harley is one of the main characters. It's very well done, delightful, and that was her debut novel. But the first one that I came across of hers was, in fact, I think it's the second one she wrote. It's a more serious crime novel called The Rivermouth. It's about a small Western Australian community living at the mouth of a river where something awful happens to a kid, and takes you back into the history of that village and into the deep history of the families there. I think she's a really great writer, one to watch, Karen Herbert. So pick up both of those.
Lots of ideas there, but as always, we like to get some of our Tsundoku podcast listeners to contribute with their ideas. So rather than asking them what's on their Tsundoku, this time we ask them, what's your tip for summer reads and what would you buy as a gift for others?
Hello, I'm Rachael and I have just turned 40. I'm incredibly grateful for my book club who has just rekindled my love of reading. Living up in the Adelaide Hills, we've been focusing on Hannah Kent, one of our local authors. So I've recently read 3 of her books, Burial Rites, The Good People and Devotion. They're quite heavy reading books, so perhaps not your typical summer fun read, but she's definitely on my recommended list. The most recent book I've read is The History of Bees by Maya Lund, which is 3 quite different stories set in different periods of time that all come together in the end. A great one for those that might be interested in climate change and also nature lovers. It really has got me interested in looking into having my own beehive. And my next book club book is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, and I feel like everyone in my book club has already read this and I'm very late to the party. I think the most favourite book I've read this year that I will be gifting to both of my grandmas will be The Dictionary of Lost Words. Beautifully written, and it really transports you back in time. Felt like it was a real learning journey for me reading this book, and I think will make a great Christmas gift.
My name's Mads. A book I would really recommend as a summer read is the Maisie Dobbs series by Jacqueline Winnispear. There is about 18 in the series now, and they're a really light, fun, easy read. It's historical fiction, strong female lead. She is a private psychologist and she solves mysteries. People come to her with like a really complex issue and she'll like pick it apart bit by bit. She has like a sixth sense sort of thing about things, so it's not just a general detective work. She bases it a lot on, I guess, more subtle signs that she picks up along the way, and it's set in World War II in England. So it's really interesting. They talk a lot about historic sites and historic bombings, and it's all based on parts of the war that actually happened. So she researches it and then she creates like a fictional story.
I'm Annabelle and I'm 8 years old and I'm in grade 2. I like the Ella diaries because Ella has a diary and she likes to write in it a lot, and I know all her secrets. This would be a good Christmas present for girls who are 8 or 7 years old. The next one is called Ella at Eden, and this is Ella from Ella Diaries, and she moves to a college and she has lots of new friends she's made there. Sometimes they're a bit cheeky and go on adventures in the college. The books that I'm planning to read are called Little Gem by Anna Zobel. I've started reading it, and she's a witch, and she accidentally, when she was in witch school, she transported herself to a new town. Oh yeah, I've started reading Harry Potter. So we're all reading it, my dad, my papa and me. We have a contest to see who can get to the end of the book first. And so far my dad's winning. One time me and my papa went on a holiday and I forgot Harry Potter. So my papa went and bought these books called Mum and Papa's Memoirs and Finn Family Mummentroll. And they're written by Tove Jansson. Yeah, I think they're hippopotamuses. In this book, they've found the magic hat and every time they put it on, strange things start happening. Yeah, this would be a good book for either girls or boys.
And that's it for this time. Don't forget, we always love to hear from you. You can send us an email or a voicemail anytime to tsundokukast@gmail.com. I'm Kath Keneally.
And I'm Annie Hastwell.
I'm Michaela Andreyev.
And I'm Sarah Martin. And I just wanted to leave you with a reading, if you'll indulge me, which is taken from Stolen Focus by Johan that Michaela was talking about earlier. And I just thought it summed up a lot of what we love about reading, and I guess it's an inspiration for why we should do it more. Reading creates a unique form of consciousness. While we're reading, we're directing attention outwards towards the word on the page, and at the same time, enormous amounts of attention is going inwards as we imagine and mentally simulate. It's different from if you just close your eyes and try to imagine something off the top of your head. It's being structured, but our attention is in a very unique place, fluctuating both out towards the page, towards the words, and then inwards towards what those words represent. It's a way of combining outwardly directed attention and inwardly directed attention. When you read fiction in particular, you imagine what it's like to be another person. You find yourself trying to understand the different characters, their motivations, their goals, tracking those different things. It's a form of practice. We're probably using the same kinds of cognitive processes that we would use to understand our real peers in the real world. You simulate being another human being so well that fiction is far better virtual reality than the machines currently marketed under that name.
Hear, hear, and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Have a lovely holidays.
This podcast is produced by 4 book addicts refusing treatment.
Kath Keneally.
Michaela Andreyev.
Sarah Martin.
And me, Annie Hastwell. Our thanks to composer Quincy Grant for the music. If you want to know more about the books and authors featured in this episode, check out the show notes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Tsundoku Cast. That's TSUNDOKU Cast.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details. Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.